Thank you very much, Professor Patak. It's really an honor to be here to exchange ideas, exchange my views on ethno-religious conflict mediation, specifically on how this could be applied not only here in the United States, but in many other countries around the world. So as he said, I am both a researcher, a scholar, and a practitioner. So I am going to do both here. Today I'm going to present some theories really that have really guided my practice. And so from those theories I'm going to be presenting, then I would narrow it to ethno-religious conflict mediation and how this could be applied. If you wouldn't mind, I'm going to share my screen. I have a PowerPoint. I am going to share from the beginning. Can you see my screen?
Okay,
yes, we can see.
Perfect.
One moment only.
All right. So my goal here is to explain the importance of ethno-religious mediation in promoting cultural diversity and specifically how to really inculcate a culture of peace within, among, and between different cultural groups, different ethnic groups, different religious groups. You know, we're here in the United States, but again, this could be applied to many other countries around the world. By a culture of war or a culture of peace, then we have to really contrast, right? So we got to know the opposite. Culture of peace, then it is implied that there is a culture of violence, right? And so for that reason, I just want to kind of explain a little bit on a culture of violence. And I was, some years ago, I became fascinated about a culture of war, a culture of violence. And I looked into the existing literatures and libraries. And so there is not really a lot about a culture of war or a culture of violence, but what we have many published works on a culture of peace and policy resolutions by the United Nations and some countries now working on the culture of peace. And this book I found very interesting by ICHRRF, published in 2008, where he argued that there is much more to war than just soldiers killing one another for whatever reason. And he went further to state that people are just as fascinated by violence and war today as they have been in the past. And this is really very interesting for me. So ICHRRF was actually a military guy and fought many wars. And this is very interesting given what we today experience, what we witness. Just a couple of days ago, a few days ago, December 6th, we saw the insurrection on U.S. Capitol, which is very also troubling, right? But this has been going on. So a culture of violence is completely a part of our society, a part of many societies, many countries. Wars going on in many countries, right now in Ethiopia, which is an ethnic conflict, ethnic war in Ethiopia, in Central African Republic, and many other countries. I just don't want to mention all those examples, but this is very important to understand. So the challenge is, and for me, I have really done some kind of research to really understand our contemporary conflicts and the challenges that we face today. And I came to a conclusion that ethnic religious differences ethnic religious differences have really contributed to some of the conflicts and wars, even racial differences, right? And the drivers, so it's not just that people are racially or ethnically or religiously different. There must be something that would lead to conflict or escalate the conflict, right? But I've come to understand that these are the kinds of conflicts that would lead to escalate to violence, and not just escalating to violence, but sometimes to war and terrorism or violent extremism. And we're faced with these challenges, and we're going to continue to have all these types of conflicts and challenges, until when we come to a realization that there is a better way to resolve it. And one of the solutions we offer is our ethno-religious conflict mediation model or dialogue. So this is very important. Now, coming to a culture of peace, the UN passed a resolution in 1999, making a culture of peace an important pillar of the UN's work. And it is defined as a culture, as an integral approach to preventing violence and violent conflicts, and an alternative to the culture of war and violence based on education for peace, the promotion of sustainable economic and social development, respect for human rights, equality between women and men, democratic participation, tolerance, the free flow of information, and disarmament. And I want to underline respect for human rights. I also want to underline democratic participation. And that is very important. And we can see it here in the differences, the clear differences between a culture of violence and a culture of war. And one of the differences I want to highlight is authoritarian governance and democratic participation. All right, and the culture of violence is really embedded in in seeing the other people who are different from me or from us as the enemy. Whereas the culture of peace will want to or seeks to understand and tolerate or build some kind of solidarity with or between among people who are different. And a culture of violence also will want to really exploit people, right? Because you don't just do that, you got to be very aggressive, to some extent. Sometimes you're going to be armed, right? So the insurrection that just took place, a lot of people who were armed. So people, before they commit violence, there must be some kind of armament. And a culture of peace will want to disarm people. And we also seek sustainable development that would, whereby many people will benefit will have access, right, to some kind of some kind of development or economic development, access to resources within the society. But in a culture of violence, a few people want to dominate, or a few groups want to dominate that, the resources available in the society. Now, the last one I want to highlight here is exclusion and inclusion. And this is actually what I am going to be focusing on. So in a culture of violence, the fundamental premise is that we know everything and we have control of everything. And so, you have to, by virtue of being a part of that culture, exclude other people. Whereas you want to include other people in a culture of peace. To be able to explain the difference between inclusion and exclusion with respect to a culture of violence and a culture of war in a multi-plural, or in a highly diverse society such as the United States, or many other countries like Nigeria or India. I looked up, I've been using this model for a long time, Thomas and Kimon, their conflict management of differences exercise survey, which is called the MODE model, management of differences exercise. So Thomas and Kimon based their model on Blake and Mouton that developed the conflict management styles. I'm sure many of you must have known or seen this before, studied it. But something is very important here, especially in the plural society. One is that some people, when they are engaged in a conflict, they might seek to either be highly assertive, which means, focus on their own needs and what their expectations are, and neglect other people's needs and other people's expectations. And this is very important. And so because of that, when a conflict occurs, some people want to avoid it. And when they avoid it, by avoiding the conflict, it means that the other people are not important. They do not attach so much importance to the other people, so they just avoid. Others who want to accommodate. By accommodating, you are giving in, right? You're giving, you accede to the other party in order for peace to reign. And you can see that in families, right? Between married people, a man and a woman, and the wife will always want to give in, or the husband will always give in, right? Just to maintain peace. And one will continuously be abused in order for peace to reign. Now, the two that are very important for me today are competing and collaborating. And competing is aggression, right? So it is just, I have to win. I have to win over the other person, right? So kind of power struggle. Whereas collaboration involves expanding a range of possible options, which is anchored on what I just said before, the idea of inclusion, and seeing the other person or other group as equally important, right? And that they got something to offer. And that is very, very important. And so my approach, the approach I have for our ethno-religious mediation, or what I refer to as the skilled facilitator approach, which I have developed following many other authors, is based on the idea of collaboration. And another way to also look at this is by understanding the difference between retributive justice and restorative justice. And so retributive justice that seeks to restore order through the imposition of sufferings, right? Proportionate reprisals. Whereas restorative justice will want to seek some kind of restoration, right? Restoring both the victim and the perpetrator. So that's just another way of looking at it. And also understanding that the community is important. And so it focuses on the damage that is already caused and how that could be repaired, right? In order to restore a broken equilibrium. And this is anchored on the traditional systems and processes of conflict resolution, whereby reconciliation becomes very important. Relationship building as a very important aspect of this very model. And peace, restoring peace in the community, right? And so that is something that I have really been working on for so long. Now, I just want to share this. I know there may be lawyers here, of course. I think you already know. that the retributive justice will seek to understand which laws were broken, who broke those laws, and what sanctions should the offenders receive, what kind of punishment should we give them. And this is debated in the courts of law, all right? And we send them to prison for what they have committed, what they have done. So it's kind of, you know, an eye for an eye. Restorative justice will seek to understand the people who were injured and what their needs are, and who will take up the responsibility. And so it becomes a need-based model. A need-based model is very important. And also understanding the injury, the nature of the injury, the nature of suffering that these people are going through, all right, and how to help them. And that's very important. Now, I love Christopher Moore. He's really a great author in terms of mediation and conflict resolution. And one of the things he has done is to develop what we refer to as the problem-solving mediation model, which is something that I'm going to show you very, very soon. But I got this continuum of conflict management and resolution approaches from Christopher Moore in his book, The Mediation Process. And he identified different ways by which we can resolve conflict. One is by a private decision making, by privately resolving the conflict by ourselves. And I just want to situate mediation and negotiation, informal discussions, which are the ones that we practice, and so that these are located within the private decision making by those who are involved in the conflict. That means ethnic groups, religious groups, racial groups, you know, people who are ideologically different, who disagree, right? People who disagree, they can come together either in groups to resolve their own conflict without having a third party, right, intervene. It is possible. And so what this means is that we respect them as, you know, respect their agencies. And when they take that initiative to come together to dialogue, right, to have a conversation, that means that, you know, peace will reign in the community. It's going to be possible for peace, and temperature will be lowered, and extremism or violent extremism will be reduced, because as many people as possible who differ, who disagree, are gradually in small groups coming together to have a conversation, to understand their differences, and also understand their where they all are, or what they agree, because there's something they agree on, right? And so you have the private third-party decision-making, where it's arbitration or other kind of administrative decision-making processes, or the legal authoritative, which is the courts or in Congress, legislation, you know, extra legal decision-making processes whereby people who are aggrieved, right, they go to the street to protest, like the Black Lives Matter movement as a nonviolent direct action, which will coerce policymakers to take a decision in order to address their needs. Or the extreme one is the violence that we've been talking about, or war, right? And the reason why people engage in violence, violent actions, is to draw attention to whatever they are actually looking forward to accomplish, to achieve, right? And so, having addressed all these things, now I've been able to situate mediation within a private decision-making party. So what this means is that we're not going to coerce people to come together, right, to have a conversation. So it's based on their free decision. They are kind of they're free to come, or they decide not to. That's But the idea is once people decide to engage in a conversation with people who are different, that means there will be a positive outcome. Now, without wasting much time, I just want to, again, look at the theory that I talked about. And one of the authors I so much admire is John Paul Lederach. And John Paul Lederach wrote a book, Building Peace, Sustainable Reconciliation in Divided Societies, which he wrote in 1977. And this book is as relevant as it really addresses some of the issues that we have today. And I want to read these fundamental questions. He says, what is the nature? What are the key characteristics of contemporary armed conflicts that divide societies across our globe? Now, he said the nature and characteristics of contemporary conflicts suggest the need for a set of concepts and approaches that go beyond traditional status diplomacy. And this is the reason why I brought this very theory, going beyond the traditional status diplomacy, the way we resolve conflicts, the way our approach to resolving the conflicts that we have, differences or problems, issues we have in our society, especially in plural societies, is really what we need to do to go beyond those traditional status diplomacy or approaches of resolving conflict. And now he says, what are useful concepts and perspectives for building peace in the midst of all these conflicts? He says, building peace in today's conflicts calls for long-term commitment to establishing an infrastructure across the levels of a society, an infrastructure that empowers the resources for reconciliation from within that society and maximizes the contribution from outside. And now, what is important here for me is infrastructure. Building and establishing an infrastructure across the levels of a society. So I'm going to show you an example how this could be done, what we are working in our organization, the International Center for Ethno-Religious Mediation. That infrastructure is very important, and it's going to be a different type of infrastructure, which goes beyond the traditional ways. The court system, right? The judicial system, all kinds of our old ways of resolving disputes in society. And that is the way we can minimize, reduce racial conflicts, racial inequalities, injustices, and all kinds of violence associated with them. Now, the last one is, what are practical approaches and activities that move us toward peaceful and constructive transformation of conflict and have the potential for sustaining that movement? And now the answer is, constructing the house of peace relies on a foundation of multiple actors and activities aimed at achieving and sustaining reconciliation. So, the infrastructure we're about to build, or we are going to build, or we have built, is an infrastructure that requires multiple actors. So it's not just one person, it's not one organization, not one group. So we have to mobilize as many actors as possible and engage them in an activity that would help in transforming our societies and in transforming people and inculcating a culture of peace. And so both the head and the body, the rooftop and the house are equally important. That means people of all ages, different positions could be mobilized to participate in this. And so the paradigm shift here we are looking forward. You see, that paradigm shift is from the statistics diplomacy, the old ways, right, to a new way, which is from a concern with the resolution of issues toward a frame of reference that focuses on the restoration and the building of relationship. And so relationship is very important. And that is where I really, I'm so much interested in ways to rebuild relationship between people who are different, either by their ethnicity or religion or race or ideology, right? Republicans and Democrats, things like that. How can they come together to really have identify the things they all agree on, and from there work on their differences? From the realm of realism toward the realm of innovation and subjectivity. Very important. So you target individuals, and we have to really be highly innovative, right? Very important. And so from a mechanical strategy to reconciliation as a central component of peace building. And so our ethno-religious mediation model focuses on relationship building. And that relationship building, we have to start from a place. And that place is what we refer to as a point of encounter, a meeting place. For instance, where we are right now is a virtual place. There must be a place, either virtual or in person. Of course, right now, because of coronavirus, can't do as many in person as possible. But there are different ways, even in publications, right? Publications are also a meeting place. And we have to be highly innovative, so highly creative. And one of the things that one of the projects that I have created in order to implement these theories, relationship, point of encounter, innovation for reconciliation to occur, is the Living Together movement, which is a grassroots dialogue groups and communities across the United States and in many other countries that are gradually being implemented. This was tested here in New York City on Park Avenue since 2014. We began to, I created it, so I began to bring people together, people of different ethnic, religious, racial groups to come and have a conversation, right? So the Living Together movement could be replicated across the United States and in many other countries. It is a civic and community-based initiative designed to help address, reduce violent conflicts through dialogue, open-hearted discussions, compassionate and empathic listening, and diversity celebration. And it is organized in small groups in communities and schools, and participants, members of these groups, could learn to recognize the same humanity in all peoples, irrespective of their racial, ethnic, religious identities. And like group members, they can, it depends on the groups. Of some groups want to decide to meet every month, or once every month. Others might want to meet like every other week or every week. So group members have the leeway, right, the freedom to agree on how often they want to meet. But the most important thing is that each member comes to these small group conversations and discussions with a unique story. A unique story. This is very phenomenal. Unique story, and that story, why is unique? Is because it's from a different community. It could be Hispanic. The other person could be an African American person. The other person could be a European person, or a white person. But even within the people we refer to as white people, they're different. They have unique stories. People are different. And so the society we live today, we have really categorized people. People are completely different, irrespective of the fact that they have shared stories, right? Shared stories, things they share in common as a result of history. But they are different. Their families are different. So they're going to come to these group conversations, dialogues with their unique story. And that's where you're going to see people we think are the same, right? Or we categorize with African Americans, that all of them are the same. You're going to see differences when they all come there to share their unique stories. And everyone is given an equal opportunity to contribute to the discussions. And now the groups will be facilitated or are facilitated by trained ethno-religious group facilitation people, right? And people who are trained in ethno-religious conflict mediation. We currently run this training here at ICHRRF, which is ethno-religious conflict mediation training. We run it every 4 times in a year, in winter, in spring, in summer, and in the fall. Now, the whole idea is to rebuild relationship. And we cannot rebuild relationship from CNN or from other media places, right? We rebuild relationship in schools, in small groups, in different communities, right? This is where the grassroots are very important. And so if we're able to replicate this in every community, then you see a rapid change in our society. And so relationship is important. And that's basically where people will see and engage as humans in relationship, engage as humans in relationship, as who they are. They come to the table, they come to the discussions just as they are, right? Just as they are. And when they come, they become a part of one body. Each group will be different. They become a part of one body, and that part, all the parts will be harmonized in a system through the enactment of relationships that will be activated in those small groups. Those small groups are very important. So it's going to be, it's natural. Bonding will occur. They all will bond because they will have something that will hold them together. And so this is very important. Now, a point of encounter is a place where these conversations will occur. In that very place, different people from different groups, different communities, background will come. They all will come and meet themselves in that particular place, at that particular place. And they could have different ideologies, right? Different religious backgrounds. That's all. They could be enemies, but they all come to that particular place. And they come there with their issues, you know, what they agree on, what they disagree on. They come there with their positions, what their positions are, and nobody's going to judge them because they're just going to be free to, you know, open up and share what they believe in. And they come there, and from their positions, then we can now ascertain what their interests are. And sometimes there are shared interests, even though we might think we differ, but there's things that we all share together, and those are called the shared interests or shared needs. And I'm going to show you right now the human needs model that we all share in common. But the most important is that in that place, at that very place, at the meeting point, emotions, that means trauma, grief, anger, pain, hurt, fears, all of them will meet one another, and histories will meet one another, right? The present, the future, and what we anticipate for the future, we all will share all those things at that very place. And so the whole thing is to be innovative, and this could be done in different ways. And we want to use it as a way to address deep-rooted animosities that persist in our country. And those things are there, they are repressed. They are repressed. They are repressed until we, you know, allow people to express themselves. These things will continue to be there, and one day they will explode, right? And you're gonna find someone who will manipulate the system, right, and use them to get people to become violent somehow, because everything will explode, right? And so at that very place, the idea is that truth and mercy will meet together, and justice and peace will kiss. John Paul Lederach argues that truth entails acknowledgement. So at that very place, people will be acknowledged and their views will be acknowledged, right? Transparency, revelation of ideas that are hidden, or views, or things that are hidden, everything will be revealed. The past and clarified. So it's not just revealing them. There's going to be clarification in the process of conversation and discussion. So people will really ask questions and know more and be educated, right? So imagine an Islamic person, an Islamic woman wearing an Islamic veil, and you don't know why that person wears that Islamic veil. And we judge that person because the person wears Islamic veil all the time. And you could come there and reveal to the group why you wear your Islamic veil, and people will ask questions and they get educated. That's clarification, clarity, and that's truth there, right? And so next time when you see an Islamic person wearing an Islamic veil, you're not going to judge that person because you now know why the person does that. And mercy entails, we show mercy, acceptance, forgiveness, support, compassion, healing, and justice, equality, right relationship, making things right. If it is in actual mediation, then we could do restitution. Or peace, which of course we are looking for, peace in our society, which entails harmony, unity, well-being, security, respect. If you're able to really come very close to someone that you're always afraid of, and you have a conversation with that person, next time you're not going to be afraid of that person. You feel safe when you see that person, and that's really very important. And then you'll be able to respect that person. And so what we are trying to achieve is reconciliation, which involves the creation of the social space where both truth and forgiveness are validated and joined together, rather than being forced into an encounter in which one must win out over the other, or envisioned as fragmented and separated parts. And so we do that through mediation. Again, there are different types of mediation. Those who already know mediation might not know different types of mediation. So one is problem solving, transformative mediation, narrative mediation, which involves storytelling, and the living together movement I just talked about involves narrative, like storytelling. And then you have restorative, relationship-based, faith-based mediation. In fact, in 2016, we published faith-based conflict resolution, exploring the shared values in the Abrahamic religious traditions, which is, I guess that it should be about 200 pages on our website. And the contributors are really great people who explored those Abrahamic religious, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and also other religious groups are included as well. Now, looked at the shared values, or the things they share in common, and we use that to come up with a model for mediation. And that's very important. And last year, in 2019, we worked on indigenous dispute resolution and national reconciliation, using indigenous dispute resolution or conflict resolution as a way to promote national reconciliation. So that one is something very important. I personally have been working on some of these things. One of the ones I worked on was looking at the Gacaca courts. Some lawyers who are here, how they leverage on the Gacaca courts, which are an indigenous conflict resolution in Rwanda, to rebuild Rwanda after the genocide against the the Tutsis. You know, I used to say Rwandan genocide until I was corrected. The official name is genocide against the Hutus, against the Tutsis. So when many Tutsis were killed in 1994. So they were able to reactivate their traditional indigenous system and leverage on that to reconcile both parties and rebuild Rwanda. And today, Rwanda has really done great. They are doing great now. And so those are different models. I'm not going to talk about each of them, but I just want to end by saying that what we do in the Living Together movement is want to understand that we have shared needs. And there are psychological needs. We all need water, right? Food, warmth, rest. Those are basic needs that each of us. And then you have the psychological need, belongingness, right? Inclusion, love, and then esteem. Want to feel accomplished, self-actualization. All right, everyone wants to really either grow, you know, have access to economic resources, financial resources, and be happy to take care of their family and business growth and all that. And those are, so the differences are how do we get to that? We need to exclude other people in order to self-actualize whatever is our goal. Or we want to do that collaboratively and create a win-win situation for all the diverse groups in our societies. And I'm going to end with this. I could send you my PowerPoint if you want. So thank you very much. And I look forward to your contributions, questions, your critiques, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Hey, thank you very much, Basil. Before we start our question answer, I really want to add more things for this introduction because initially I introduced Basil as an individual, but Basil is president of International Center for Ethno-Religious Mediation. Some of the very interesting projects he has taken is, one is International Divinity Day, which is considered to be September 4, 2021. And he is working with n number of organizations to make sure that United Nations declares September 4, 2021 in New York City as the International Divinity Day. Then under ICHRRF, Basil has organized a forum called World Elders Forum. And he interacts with elders of the indigenous traditions. He brings them together and then they work together on the indigenous approaches towards conflict mediation. And then he is regularly conducting, as he has mentioned, ethnic, racial, and religious conflict mediation trainings. And he organizes this Living Together movement is another area where he has been very successful. He is the editor of the journals which are published by ICHRRF. One journal is known as Journal of Living Together. And if you look at their articles, they're very impressive, very lovely articles have been contributed by many different people. And out of those articles, he has edited 2 volumes also. And then he organizes an annual international conference. This year it didn't happen, but in 2021 it is going to be in October. And I will recommend all of our group to attend the conference, which is in New Jersey. And I am also part of that conference. I will be attending. He has a conflict mentoring network, and what he is trying to do is to create a team of people who are expert in ethno-religious mediation, so that they will also participate in different kinds of mediations. Interestingly, I just want to point it out, one important thing is that this ICHRRF, whose president is our Basil Ugorji, we have a team of people, and it is very interesting for all of us to understand that there is Reverend Dr. Daniel Medina, who is from United States. We have members from Nigeria, Lee Karim, Ronnie Williams. We have Basil from Nigeria, Dr. Cholpon, Turda Levia, Kyrgyzstan, Mark Chingono, Zimbabwe, Nigeria. We have Javed William from Pakistan, Samuel Murderoa from Congo, Africa, Malin Daviknes from Norway, so, and Paul Jones from United States. So his board of board members almost represent like 10 different countries, and Basil is the president of that organization and doing phenomenal work. So I really appreciate Basil for your time, and let us open the forum for question and answers.
Okay. So since we have a very small audience, pretty much everyone will get a chance to ask questions, and I will have people ask questions in turns. Since we have an external guest, Mr. Kishore, I would honor the external guest and ask Mr. Kishore if he has any questions for Dr. Ugorji. Kishore, you have to unmute your mic.
Dr. Ugorji, can you unshare your screen so we can see a full screen people's videos?
I can hear. I can hear.
Perfect, thank you.
Kishore, please introduce yourself and ask your question to Dr. Ugorji.
I don't have any specific questions per se. I've been following, and this is the first meeting, and thank you for the warm welcome. I feel privileged to be part of this. My introduction, I come from India, and I happen to have a chance to attend this meeting. And from India, being from India, I like to have on the same theme of what Dr. presented. I like to promote that idea of ethnic originality wherever we go, and spread the message about the authenticity while having a good relationship with whoever you are with, and mingling with people with cultural differences and with mutual respect is what I believe, and that's all the thoughts that I would like to share. And when it comes to questions, nothing specific, but pardon my ignorance here, but maybe there are such close-knit groups that are trying to do something good to the society. Groups have come together, but they remained as smaller groups. And on the ground, when it comes to practically taking it further to the next step, how do we coalesce all these small groups, and what modus operandi can be executed in order to have all these groups come together to form a bigger group and a bigger movement? That's where I think will be, I would be interested to know more about how that plan can be executed, if that makes sense. So while listening to all this presentation, this was what I was thinking as to on the ground, how will things happen? Thank you.
Dr. Ugorji, do you have any comments on the?
Yeah, that's Kishore, I want to thank you for asking that question. That's a very important question here, and that's one of the challenges that we have in peace building field. There is a multiplication of the same program or the same project in many places, and sometimes things are being some kind of people do the same thing over and over again, and there's no coordination, so a kind of lack of coordination, and that reduces the effectiveness or efficiency of the work. But I want to let you know that within the United Nations, which I happen to have been there at the headquarters, and right now we are affiliated with the UN International Center for Ethno-Religious Mediation. We have the UN Special Consultative status with the Economic and Social Council. And that's one of the things they have done. The Economic and Social Council of the UN has been mobilizing civil society organizations and nonprofits from many countries around the world and give them different status in order to begin to coordinate some of the harmonize and for organizations to work and partner with their peers, fellow organizations who are doing the same thing in order to accomplish and become very effective. And so this has been very helpful. And in their forums, you identify organizations that are working, doing the same or similar things that you're doing. And sometimes you partner and build some kind of partnership alliance and be able to implement one or two or similar projects. And so that's something that each organization should really look into. And in different countries, I guess there are national forums for organizations who are doing the same thing or similar things for them to be able to work together. Yeah, but again, it's a big challenge how to get that done in order to become very effective.
Thank you very much. I know Professor Ved Nanda raised his hand, so it is Professor Nanda's turn to ask a question to Dr. Ugorji.
My apologies. I have to leave soon, and that's why I raised my hand. And I simply want to express the deep gratitude on my part because I have followed your credentials, I have followed your accomplishments, and the reason why I'm saying it is because for many years I taught international conflict resolution along with another person who has done a whole lot of work in practically and also in theory. And it's for law students and MA and PhD students together. And then I've had the privilege, because we have a loose professorship here on peace studies, and working with the person who teaches, my colleague, we have brought in the Armenians and Turks together. And then I have been working with people, not right now, but I have worked with the university, American University, and this is the Washington College of Law, and there is a public interest law group, and I've been with them on Nagorno-Karabakh issue and brought the parties together. Then another colleague of mine who is at Syracuse University Law School, and we had been working for bringing together the Palestinian and Israelis. And so in many settings, I've had the privilege of being together with all these groups. And I was just wondering, this is eloquent, wonderful presentation, and I know that you have done a lot of work. But my request would be that in these presentations, if you could kindly give a couple examples of people that you have brought together, and if there is an outcome of that, because that would be useful. Because in all these settings, Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenian and Turks, they came together. And I think earlier this year, before coronavirus, we sat together and the Turks apologized to Armenians. That has never happened in many instances. And in Nagorno-Karabakh, we did not succeed. The Azerbaijanis and the Armenians sat together, spent some time, but not much happened. But in any event, that was simply my request and my suggestion. Mm-hmm. And I think we're deeply, deeply grateful that you gave the time to come. The sad part is that I have to be away, but I will wait for a few minutes for you to say something. And Adityanji, I'm not the one who would raise hands and ask something. I did that because I have to leave, and I did not want to leave without giving my deepest gratitude to our distinguished speaker and say how grateful we are that you came.
Really, thank you very much, Dr. Berg. I want to thank you the great work you've done bringing these groups together, and also your scholarship. I mean, it's been very, it's really interesting listening to you. On a practical note, I have also been involved with the Armenians and the talks, actually. One of my friends who is here in New York, Dr. Anika Legian, who is an Armenian, actually, whose parents were victims of the Armenian genocide. And because of that, she's been working on trauma and healing. She's at Columbia University in New York here. And so I've been involved with her. She works with me to help in organizing our conference, which is the annual international conference on ethnic and religious conflict resolution and peace building that we do every year, except that we didn't do that last year because of coronavirus. And so she helps bring the Armenians, some of the sections that she does, I work with her and that with other people, is to get the Armenians and the talks for a dialogue program during this very conference. And so these people come from Turkey, or some come from Europe. And we also have in Nigeria, for instance, there is an interethnic conflict, which is also interreligious conflicts in Nigeria between the Northerners, the Hausas, and the Igbos, the Southeasterners. Those who are aware of the Nigeria-Biafra War that took place in 1967, in fact, from 1967 to 1970, that led to the death of more than 1 million people. Some will argue that about 3 million people died during that war. Was basically a war between the Easterners, the Igbos, and the Northerners, so to say, even though the Southwesterners, the Yorubas, worked with the Northerners to fight the Biafrans, who are the Igbos, the mostly Christians. But that war, that war has really been a big problem for Nigeria, for Nigerian unity, and there's really a big problem there. So one of the things we've done is to also use the Living Together movement as a platform to bring people together, the Northerners, the Hausas, and the Igbos for dialogue. And some of the interesting things that I have witnessed, especially in 2016, at the Interchurch Center in New York, where when we invited the Interfaith Amigos, a rabbi, an imam, and a pastor from Seattle, from Washington State. And they came, they're very famous people, great people. They've been really doing dialogue all over the world. So they kind of celebrities in dialogue program. And so one of the things that I did was to create what I call a prayer for peace. And it was really magical. And I used one of the models that I showed you here, which is the restorative justice-based mediation model, and added elements of narrative mediation model to it. And during this event, and I worked with the Brooklyn Interdenominational Choir, which is a choir that has African Americans, Asian Americans, white Americans, and all kinds. So it's highly diverse, so a large group. And so during the program, what I noticed was that people came from many places, and people who ordinarily wouldn't hold hands, people who wouldn't talk to each other. But during the event, and that was for me the highlight of everything we have done here. So we noticed, magically speaking, that people began to cry during that very prayer for peace that we did at the Interchurch. It wasn't a religious event. It was, a dialogue program. But the way I created this and the way it happened magically with music and art. People were crying and then holding hands together. And in the end, it was just phenomenal. We have a video of that event. And that's the kind of event that could be replicated as well. A prayer for peace, that kind of event that could be replicated in many places. So there are many other instances whereby I have intervened in terms of mediation. Recently, I did a mediation. I was a mediator, international mediator. I do high-level mediation for high-level conflicts. So there's one I just did for indigenous communities in Iraq with oil companies and some other countries involved, big powers like Russia and other. But the bottom line is that using some of these little models that we have, and you try to implement them, it's not just theory, right? You try to bring them to real-life situation that in the end, something magical happens, depending on how you're able to articulate and redirect all the skills, right, that you have gotten from the training, from your studies and all that. And then something magical will happen, and then people will be reconciled. I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Bird. That's really very important, how to transition from theory to practice, and not just theory and alone. You know, practice is very important.
And I want to just add for you that Sherry Broder and John Van Dyke, these are in Hawaii, and I had a visiting chair for a year. And during that time, the Hawaiian people and the white people, and bringing them together and sitting with them, we had wonderful time, and that dialogue has continued with them. And I was a rookie at that time, 67, and I went to Biafra and went to Nigeria and came back and wrote. I wrote for the Denver Post, but then I wrote a law review article on self-determination and how Biafra is the one that United Nations did not accept territorial integrity and political independence. But in any event, we'll continue our conversation. And Atitenji, my apologies, I have to leave.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much indeed,
Thank you.
Professor Nanda.
Thank you very much.
So let's give other people also a chance. Dr. Shekhar Patel, do you have any question?
No, I was a little bit interested about the natives and, you know, based upon your experience, how do they feel? Because they have been converted,
they get out.
Their language destroyed, their culture destroyed, and how do you think that there could be any reconciliation, you know, especially in the current context?
Dr. Shekhar Patel, besides your question, why don't you introduce yourself as president of ICCS to Dr. Ugorji?
Yeah, yes, Dr. Ugorji. My name is Shekhar Patel, and since 2003, I'm involved with International Center for Cultural Studies, and our goal is to provide a forum to native traditions across the globe to be able to, people should be able to hear their voice. So what we do is bring them together, and primary thing is to network among them. We don't provide any solutions, but we do provide them platforms so that their voice can be heard.
Interesting. I want to thank you, Dr. Shekhar. The indigenous communities are very, very unique in the sense that they have a peculiar way of dealing with conflict, which is a traditional way of dealing or resolving their own conflicts. And the understanding of conflict as well is completely different from our Western based, you know, conflict resolution models that we have developed through our studies, right? And that's basically one of the things that we explored in 2018 when we we held a conference. We held a conference at Queen's College. Queen's College on the indigenous systems and practices of conflict resolution. And your question is exactly what we try to understand. So our idea was to understand, to study those indigenous systems and practices of conflict resolution. And we brought in people from many countries. So when I say indigenous systems and practices of conflict resolution, I also include traditional religious systems and practices of conflict resolution, right? So we brought in people from many countries, experts on the traditional systems of conflict resolution, as well as the traditional people, indigenous people themselves. So we had people from Israel, from Middle East, from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, right, here in the US, indigenous people here. And so that was really very phenomenal. And we published, edited the outcome of the conference. The articles were peer reviewed and published. But one of the things that we learned in the process, as these scholars and traditional people were exchanging ideas, was that many scholars, many people who are Western trained scholars, so to say, feel they really understand a lot about indigenous peoples. But during the conversation, it was apparent that they actually don't know a lot, right? So, because the indigenous peoples were here. So we had the kings, we had kings from Africa who are traditional kings, who, for instance, in Nigeria, we had a king, in his kingdom is located the oil and gas of Nigeria. So that's the oil and gas of Nigeria is within his kingdom. And he's a very enlightened, educated man. And we also have people from Ghana. And so the bottom line, just to summarize, to answer your question, is that they were somehow kind of disappointed that, scholars themselves feel that they feel that scholars actually don't really understand their own traditional systems of conflict resolution, how they practice mediation, because they do mediation, they do resolve land disputes, they try to preserve their environment, right? Environmental preservation and all that. But at the same time, there are so many things that they learned from scholars. And so it was kind of a win-win situation. They were able to learn from these scholars, and then scholars were able to learn from them. And just to summarize, the United Nations has the Office for Indigenous Peoples Issues. And Mr. Brody, who is in charge of that office at the United Nations headquarters, was a part of this conference. I invited him to be a part of it. And he was surprised because he presented what the United Nations has been doing with respect to indigenous peoples. The UN does the Indigenous Peoples Issues meeting, I think every April. But he was surprised that the kings and the queens who attended that meeting took an initiative during the conference to create the World Elders Forum, an international forum whereby these people could come every year to learn and exchange ideas with scholars who are researching traditional and indigenous peoples issues in partnership with the United Nations. So that was actually very phenomenal. And I would love to partner with your organization so we could exchange ideas and work together and see how to promote this idea.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments on that. Yeah.
I'll give chance to Mr. Clements next.
Hello, Dr. Basil. My name's Carl. I have actually a lot of questions, but I'm going to pick one. So let me just, something that's pertinent, relevant. So right now in the United States, I found that for the last several years, the two sides in this polarized environment, they're just not talking to one another. There's a lot of bad faith and they're not even willing to talk to one another. Why? When do you think this started? Do you think it's the way diversity was introduced into the United States over the last 25 years? Or where do you think that went wrong? And also related to that, do you feel that there's some, in that range of options, when we move down that spectrum that you were talking about, is fractal localism one of those options where, okay, you have your set of values, I have my set of values, the two don't mingle very well. You don't want to send your kids to the same school that I send my kids because I want my schools to teach behavior in a certain way. You want your schools to do it. So do you think there's a space for fractal localism where you and your type live in that area and me and my type live in that area, and then we just interact according to certain protocols? Do you feel that's a viable option going forward in terms of a platform for some kind of diversity, or do you think that's just that goes against the soul of understanding and things? So.
Mm-hmm. The U.S. is a very peculiar case with respect to multiculturalism, and to some extent, based on my experience so far, and also experience of other countries, the experiment here has proven to be somehow positive compared to some other countries. I lived in France for many years, and I have in fact, my master's, I did my master's in philosophy and conflict resolution as well in France, in Poitiers. So I speak French very fluently because my masters were also taught in French language. And so I really understand the idea of la laïcité française. And I had many friends while I was in France, many friends from North Africa, North African friends who were French born. They were born in France, but whose parents are from North Africa or Comore or other countries, right? So I had a lot of friends like that. And I know what the extent to which, of course, assimilation, the idea of assimilation, French idea of assimilation has worked. The US talks about integration, right? So it's not assimilation, so to say. And so here there is a possibility for people to really achieve the American dream, right, in the US. It's possible. Compared to some countries in Europe. All right. Now, having said that, I know the US has its own challenges, right? Which is embedded in the history of this country, and it's always a struggle, right? A struggle. Now, my experience so far and the way I've been able to analyze it, I wrote an article which was published by Ethnic Studies Review. Ethnic Studies Review published my article, I guess, in 2016 or 17. The title of the article is Encrypted Racism. Encrypted racism. So I wrote from structural racism to encrypted racism. And that was my article. My argument was that the Black Lives Matter movement, when Trayvon Martin was murdered, when he was killed, that was actually when the Black Lives Matter movement started, that what it did wasn't just to kind of tell us that there is racism in the US, but what it did was to decrypt. That means to get us to understand that there is a covert, I call it a covert form of racism. And so that covert form of racism became apparent. So we now know that even within the police department, that there are bad eggs. and there are bad eggs everywhere. However, not all the police officers are bad, right, or racist, but that someone can still wear their uniform and shoot somebody and kill a young Black African-American person just because of who that person is, and not because of what a person has done, right? So there is this element, but not everyone is like that. And so that, how do we understand that? So we got to really move away from structural racism, which was outlawed. Or in fact, racism is outlawed in the United States, or over racism, of course, if they catch you, right? If you discriminate. For instance, if I'm trying to rent a room or rent an apartment, right, in your house, and you discriminate against me, you don't want to rent to me because I am Black, and that is a crime. I mean, that's you got to be held accountable for that. You could be prosecuted, right? But if you tell me, no, you don't have any available apartment because you heard my voice, I don't speak like you, or when I come to your office and you see me, and you say, no, somebody just took it, right? But in actual sense, in reality, you have that, it's still vacant, right? But when I came to your office, you tell me, no, somebody took it. They just took it. They just, well, you're the one that invited me. You asked me to come. And I got there, you just told me, no, that somebody just paid for it, right? That is what I refer to as encrypted racism. And that is actually what the US is suffering right now, because nobody's gonna admit I'm a racist. I'm not gonna say I'm a racist, but I'm gonna find a way to do that in such a way that you're not gonna know. And that is what I'm doing, right? And so that is the problem. And this came, why did it become obvious? Because it has been decrypted. It was decrypted through social media, decrypted through the smartphones. Someone can record what is happening and share it with the world, and everybody's gonna see it. But these things have been going on for many, many years, right? And that's my analysis. Second, that you were able to see somebody who also decrypted it by emerging as the first African-American president. What do you expect? There's going to be a pushback to that. And that pushback was championed by President Trump. I'm sorry, he championed it before even, he probably had an ambition of becoming a president. I don't know, but when he was saying that this man wasn't born in the US, and championing that, appearing on the televisions and all the time, he was there talking about that, mobilizing it, right? And so all these things are included in my article. And so I think that is a continuation of that process of encrypted racism, and suddenly that encrypted racism was decrypted, because you cannot discriminate. You cannot tell people overtly that you're a racist. The civil rights law, right, outlawed racism in the US and overt and or open discrimination. And so we got to find a different way of doing that. And unfortunately, we now see it has become obvious because we have new tools of decrypting it. And that's why it's obvious right now. But that does not mean that this is weren't there. They were all there. But we now see them clearly because there are new ways of decrypting it. And that new way, the new ways of decrypting it began with the Black Lives Movement in this new era. Whereas the civil rights movement ended open, outlawed, open and overt discrimination and racism, the Black Lives Matter movement, all right, is very helpful, has been very instrumental in decrypting encrypted racism. So we can see it clearly. And that's the way I analyzed it. I mean, that's my own way. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ugorji. Let me move on to the next person. I will give chance to Mr. Krishna at Sumili.
Oh, thank you for your time, Dr. Basil. Dr. Nandaji asked my question. Actually, I wanted to see where this paradigm is being applied and how conflicts are being resolved. And you gave a good explanation. Thank you for your time.
Professor Patel, do you have any question?
No, Aditanji.
Okay, so I'll ask one brief last question and then we'll call it a day. And actually it is modalities of getting into partnership agreement with your organization and ICHRRF. I'm interested in that. I think we can do a lot of things jointly, commonly. And I think you look into your institution's policy of entering into partnership agreement with similar like-minded organizations. We don't have to answer this question right now, but this is what we want to aspire to work towards. And I will probably call you later on and we will try to develop some sort of framework agreement so that both organizations can work together. I'm deeply indebted to you for giving your precious time, educating us on peace mediation and resolution of ethno-religious conflicts. And I think we learned a lot. And if you can send us your slide set, I think all of us will appreciate that, because there was a lot of theoretical material, you know, from various sources, including Abraham Maslow's, you know, self-actualization theory. So that was very fascinating. So on behalf of the team ICHRRF, I formally thank you for taking time off for this presentation. And I think this would not be the first, but this would be one of many, you know, sessions you will have with us in one capacity or the other. So my heartiest thanks. We will close the forum now, and off the records, you know, we will stay in touch with you to develop a framework for partnership agreement between the two organizations and how we can work together in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Basil.
Thank you.